to yet another episode of Pork Puck Hockey, where we talk hockey and only hockey. I'm your host, JBACS, and we have a special one for you today. It was the trade deadline on Monday, and there were trades galore, man. Let me tell you. It seems like every team except a few, there were only like 3 or 4 teams that didn't make a trade this year. So a lot of teams trying to improve and make that Stanley Cup run. And we're going to start with Boston Bruins. They get Andre Kasha from the Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim will receive David Backes, Axel Anderson, and a first-round pick in next year's draft. I think it's a fairly good trade for Boston, trying to get over that hump and get back to the Stanley Cup final and ultimately win the cup. So we'll see. The next one. The Winnipeg Jets, they get Cody Eakin and for a fourth rounder from the Vegas Golden Knights. Winnipeg, they're one of those bubble teams that are trying to improve and hopefully get into the playoffs. An interesting thing, this isn't a trade, but it did happen on Monday. Zach Bogosian, he was cut from the Sabres, and they essentially got rid of that contract, and he signs with Tampa for a $1.3 million deal for 1 year. So he goes from being an AHL guy to back in the NHL and making more money. So good for him. Washington Capitals, they've acquired Ilya Kovalchuk from the Montreal Canadiens for a third-round pick. This is a good move by the Caps to get some depth forwards and help them stay deep in the playoff run here and keep their offense going. The Edmonton Oilers, they made a lot of moves. They get Mike Green from the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for Kyle Bradziak and a conditional pick. So Detroit, they're selling their team, man. I don't know what to tell you. They're struggling, so they're going to just start trading away. And that is what it is. Colorado Avalanche. They get Vladimir Nemestenko, who is going to help them with some depth, and the Senators get a return for him, a 21 fourth-round pick. So Avs didn't spend too much to get a decent depth guy. Next up, the New York Islanders. They've got Jean-Gabriel Pageau from the Ottawa Senators. They had to let go of a first, a second, and a third-round pick for this man, but Pageau's a good guy. He can get some face-off wins out there, and he's going to help the boys do well on the island, so good for them. The Hurricanes. The Hurricanes are the team I think that ultimately won this trade deadline. They got Vincent Trocheck from the Florida Panthers, but the Panthers also did fairly well. They get Eric Halla, Lucas Wallmark, and 2 minor leaguers in this deal. So Florida's trying to build still, but pretty good trade for both teams there. Philadelphia Flyers, they get Nate Thompson from Montreal for a 5th-round pick. Little small trade there. Here's a big one. The Pittsburgh Penguins have acquired Patrick Marleau from San Jose for a 3rd-round pick. This is a good depth move by the Penguins. If any injuries were to hurt them before the playoff run, they do now have Patty Marleau to kind of lead the way as a veteran status, and he's a pretty good forward. Toronto Maple Leafs, they get Calle Rosen from Colorado, and Colorado gets goaltender Michael Hutchinson. This one I find a little odd. Colorado's goaltending has been pretty good between their younger guys and Philip Grubauer. Grubauer's been hurt, but still, I don't understand this one that much. Philadelphia, they made another move and acquired Derek Grant, who's been pretty hot from Anaheim right now. Anaheim gets a 4th-rounder and a minor leaguer in that trade. The Flyers making some moves. They want to get back in the playoff run here. Buffalo makes a move for Mr. Wayne Simmons. They traded a 5th-round pick in the 2021 draft for him. So not a huge spend for a guy who gives some depth. Anaheim, they've gotten Danton Heinen from Boston for Nick Ritchie. Pretty good 1-for-1 swap there for both squads. Next up, Montreal and Ottawa swap minors, and Montreal gets a 7th round pick. Montreal's another team that kind of sold this draft. Edmonton, they made another good move. Andreas Athanasiou from Detroit for 2 second-round picks. Athanasiou, a very good player in Detroit. He should be high-flying offensive power with Mr. McJesus, Connor McDavid. So we'll see how they work out together. Next up, Edmonton also gets another player, Tyler Ennis, from Ottawa for a 5th rounder in the 2021 draft. Pittsburgh reunites with Connor Sheary and picks up Evan Rodriguez from Buffalo, and Buffalo gets Dominic Cahoon in that trade. Carolina, they pick up Sammy Vatanen and Brady Skjei from the Devils and Rangers, respectively. Very good pickups for Carolina here, as that's some solid defense to help them make the run. Next up, Tampa Bay snags Barclay Goodrow from the Sharks for a 3rd round, and a 3rd round from the Sharks, and the Sharks get a 1st rounder and Anthony Greco. Vegas gets Robin Lehner in a 3D team trade. Lehner comes in to pretty much replace Malcolm Subban, who was involved in that 3D trade, and Lehner's a good guy to have backing up Marc-Andre. There was a bunch of minor trades through some other teams, but those were some of the big names who went. Injuries. Only one this week to report. Jake Muzzin's out 4 weeks with a broken hand. There's still a bunch of guys injured, but that was one of the big ones. A bunch of guys who've been injured from past weeks. Alexander Ovechkin, he's finally done it. Scored his 700th goal. He is on a pace to hopefully break Gretzky's record, but who knows? Injuries and playtime might affect that, but he doesn't seem like he's slowing down. A Russian machine never breaks. Next up, we got Pavel Franco signing an extension with Colorado for 2 years on an AAV of $2 million. Martin Frk signs an extension with the Los Angeles Kings for 2 years with an AAV of $725. Rocco Grimaldi, he signs an extension with Nashville for 2 years for $2 million. Chris Kreider, ultimately we thought he would be traded on Monday, but he signs and stays in the Big Apple on a 7-year deal for $6.5 million AAV. Something that was pretty cool. We saw E-Bug, emergency backup goaltender. David Ayers took the world by storm, comes in for the Hurricanes, and beats the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a Toronto Marlies practice goalie, essentially. He's 42 years old, and he was at one time their Zamboni driver. So he was on hand for the game in Toronto, and both goaltenders for Carolina were out. So he comes in and saves the day. Pretty cool stuff. Scotty Upshall has announced his retirement. Man was a good hockey player. Played a lot of games, and now he's hanging up the skates, but very cool stuff. So before we hit the stats and standings to end today's episode, I want to thank our boys over at Sunreaver for the sweet intro. If you want to check them out, their link is in the bio below, but it's also at the end of the video. So thank you. Standings. Washington is taken first back in the Metro with an 84 points. Pittsburgh, 80 points in second, and Philly right on their heels at 79 points. The Atlantic, Boston leads the way with 90, Tampa Bay with 85, and Toronto with 74. Wild card, we got the Islanders with 77, the Columbus Blue Jackets with 76, the Hurricanes 74, the Rangers 72, and Florida 72 tops out the 5. Western Conference, St. Louis still leading the way, 84, Colorado 81, Dallas 80. Pacific, we got Vegas 78, Vancouver 74, Edmonton 74, very tight race there. Wild card, Calgary 72, Nashville 70, Winnipeg 70, Arizona 70, Minnesota 67, rounding out the top. Stats haven't really changed much other than some guys adding some points to their totals. Leon Draisaitl at 99 points. The goals leader is David Pastrnak, 45. The assist leader is Draisaitl, 62. Goalies, Darcy Kuemper, 2.17 GAA. Anton Khudobin, save percentage, 931. And shutout leader is Elvis Merzlikins with 5. Marc-Andre Fleury also has 5. Rookies, Quinn Hughes is the first to reach 50 points of the rookies, so congrats to him. Dominic Kubalik, 26 goals, and the assist leader, Quinn Hughes with 42. All right, folks, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next week. JBACS out.